let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
I welcome this kind of examination.
You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
That's why I don't read the newspaper. I'm a man. I'm 40.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency.
As of now, I am in control here in the White House.
This is crack cocaine from the White House. It could easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy.
Good evening, this is Mae Brussel in Carmel, California.
Anybody who's not willing to change based on what they learned is ignorant.
Coffee's for closers only.
I think we're giving you enough.
On to Chicago and let's win there.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
This is the Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hi, this is Bob Kemp. You're listening to the Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hello, America and the world. Welcome to the Midnight Rider News Show. I'm S.T. Patrick, your friendly neighborhood host, traipsing and traversing through the trials and travails that have so tempestuously and untruthfully been blasted into your eyes, ears, and minds by the state-sponsored talking heads, the court historians, and textbook conglomerates that control information today. Well, tonight we have episode 134, Walt Brown on JFK conference history, Turncoats, and Yankees. Our guest tonight is Walt Brown, Ph.D., and he's the author of The Kennedy Execution, The Warren Omission, and The People versus Lee Harvey Oswald. He's also done quite a few more projects than that, and we'll speak with him about some of those tonight. He'll be up next in the Midnight Hour. First, as you have come to expect, a little cleaning of the castle. So this is the pre-Dallas episode of the show. I'll be going down to the conferences this week, and I did say conferences, so an episode or two after that, we'll do a review. Now, it won't be the usual review. We won't be going through every speaker doing an overview, because again, I'll be bouncing around between both conferences, and I'll be spending a little bit of time in Dealey Plaza as well. So we're going to come back, we're going to do that episode, and we'll basically review what I see. But I'm also hoping to record some short segments with some live guests for that episode. So you'll hear some names and you'll hear some people that you recognize from this show in one form or the other. It'll be fun. I hope you're looking forward to it because I absolutely am. And hey, I did want to say this before we get into the show. You can still get all three episodes, all three issues of Garrison, the Journal of History and Deep Politics. You can get those at our Lulu page. And for a link to that, as always, midnightridernews.com. All the info is there. Now look, it's Christmas time, it's Hanukkah, it's whatever season that it's supposed to be for you to give gifts. So if you have that history fan in your life and you just don't know what to get them, those three issues are worth it. I think they'll like it, I think they'll be surprised, and I think they'll be satisfied. That said, we'll be right back with Walt Brown.
This is Nicholas Schreck, author of The Manson File, Myth and Reality of an Outlaw Shaman, and director of Charles Manson's Superstar. For more on the legacy of Charles Manson's life and death, the possible impact on his former community members, and what he meant to political and cultural America, listen to episode 89 of the Midnight Rider News Show.
Walt Brown, PhD, has become a friend of the show. He's been really supportive of this show. He's been really supportive of the magazine. He's been in every issue of the magazine so far, and I'm glad to have him back tonight. Now, as I said earlier, he's the author of The Kennedy Execution, The People vs. Lee Harvey Oswald, and The Warren Omission, amongst other things, which we'll get into this evening. So I'm glad to have him back. Walt, thanks so much for being back.
Oh, it's good to be back on your show, and it's November.
It is November, yes.
That month
JFK.
is always, exactly. That's exactly it. It's a time when, unfortunately, fewer and fewer people have the awareness of what November means, but the ones that do have the awareness, each year it means a little more, and that's important.
Well, absolutely. And I think that November is really grounding, actually. I think it's an important month for what we do here. I know it's an important month for you. And while we remember every month, I think that November for this community is really sort of like Easter for Christians in a way. It's a special time. It's a special time to reflect in a way that can really get lost in these daily duties of life throughout the year. And as I said in the introduction, I'll be in Dallas this month. As you know, it's conference season. And I know that you and I talked on a previous episode about conferences and their value or lack thereof, depending upon your opinion. And I know we talked about the way that you see it. But do you remember your inaugural conference, why you went, who you most wanted to meet and speak to?
Well, it depends on how you define conference. The first time I spoke in front of, I'm going to say more than 100 people. Yeah, amazingly enough, the person that put it together and was the overall major domo was Mark Zaid, who's the lawyer for the whistleblowers.
Yep. Wow.
And he's getting some blowback right now, and it's probably well deserved because I wouldn't trust Mark Zaid with my piggy bank. But it's a question that has soup to nuts answers. That day it was up in Albany, New York, and the other guests included a couple of people from the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, who were very interesting. A guy named Bob Saltzman, who used to do the media for Mark Lane's presentations. And this guy had some incredible stuff. And then George Michael Evica spoke. Dick Russell spoke. Mary Woodward, the journalist who you can see in the Zapruder film, she stood up and waved to the crowd. And I went last. And I had just had 7 hours of conspiracy stuff, gloom and doom, cloak and dagger, so I did some comedy. And it went over. It went over.
The comedy got over.
It went over, I thought, very well. Didn't have anything to do with getting to the bottom of the thing. But that was 1992, and I had sent a letter to the conference that used to be was called ASK, Assassination Symposium on Kennedy. And I'd sent them a letter in the summer when I knew People versus Oswald was coming out in August of 92, that I'd like to, have a chance at their conference. So on August 18th, they mailed me a letter saying, we're all booked up, and, but thank you for your interest. Okay, I understand. I'm the new kid on the block. So I gave a go-ahead to the Albany deal, and about 2 weeks before it was due to happen, I get a second letter from ASK, also dated August 18th, inviting me to come and speak. Well, I wrote them a letter and I said, I'm sending you a copy of your first August 18th letter saying no. I made a commitment, and if I make a commitment, I keep it. I hope you will consider me for next year, but I can't be there in 92. And I lucked out because Norman Mailer was the keynote speaker. That was just a horror. But I finally did go in 93, and it was a challenging time because, number one, there was an airline strike, and number two, there were some kind of flare point questions that were immediately topical. One of them was that Zapruder could not have done what he did because his camera didn't exist in 63. And on the plane with me was an executive from Kodak who had all the goods and said, look, here's what we got. And I mean, he and I are back, where they serve the meals. We're standing there, and he's showing me stuff as the plane is bouncing around. And then there was some other issue that such and such thing could not have happened, and somebody was there with the goods saying it could have happened, and it could have happened this way because that kind of, whatever it was, technology or whatever it was, it applied on that day. So at my first conference, I was on a medico-legal panel sitting between Mark Zaid and David Lifton.
That is a trio.
Boy, there's bookends for you. But the beauty of the situation in the early conferences I went to, and I'll get to the beyond in a second, the beauty of it then was, for the most part, you didn't have crackpots. You had people whose work was out there, and here's what I say, and here's my research. Now, I'm going to present it in a way that I hope makes it clear to you, the listener. And if you agree, tell me. If you don't agree, tell me, and tell me why. Don't throw spitballs. Just collegiality. And that was a tremendous source of growth. And just as an example, the last time I spoke at a conference per se, was at the WECT gathering in 2013. And the letter, it was found in 1975, and it was supposedly from Lee Oswald, and it said, "Dear Mr. Hunt, I don't know if it was dated November 8th of 63. Should we go ahead, or I'm waiting for information?" But somebody in that audience, and someone who I tremendously respect, said, "Wait a minute, could that be Dear Mr. Hurt?" Because the ONI guy who was the muckety-muck was John Hurt. Whoa. That's taken a conference statement and turning it into something much larger than life. So what happened in 93, and of course, it was contentious because Mark Zaid was sitting on the fence. He was not saying, "Oh yeah, it's a conspiracy." He's saying, "Well, you got to kind of step back and then it was subsequently discovered that he'd been helping Gerald Posner.
Whoa!
You may have heard of him.
Yeah, maybe once or twice.
So that night, Saturday night, instead of showing movies, they were going to have 8 people in 8 breakout rooms. Because, the crowd was about 1,200 people. Those were the days and the nights. And Adele Edison was going to talk about Redbird Airport and what she'd found out, with regards to, ferry having a plane or whatever. John Davis was speaking on something, and he was a tremendous speaker. And they got down to me at the end. I said, all these people are giving me this great conspiracy stuff. I said, I'm going to do my comedy in room G. And I got a full house. It was amazing. And I did something called Sound Bites from the Warren Commission. I did a Who's on First, but it was Who Fired the First Shot. It doesn't take a lot of imagination. You were in Dallas that day. Who fired the first shot? Yes. What do you mean, yes? I'm asking you who fired the first shot, and I'm telling you who fired the first shot. Like the old Abbott and Costello.
Right.
And then I went on for about an hour, and nobody left. They taped it, and of course I'd signed a release, so the next day they were selling tape cassettes of me for $15 as fast as they could copy them. And they sold somewhere between 800 and 1,000 of them at $15 a piece. I got one free.
Hey, is there ever a chance that you'll return to the conferences in Dallas again?
I haven't been in Dallas since 2005. Probably if you're defining conference, I'd say no. Simply because the people who have taken them over, I have no use for them, and no need to get into personalities. There was one group that wanted to sponsor a mock trial of Oswald, and the purpose was to get a Texas jurist to sign off on a finding that Oswald was innocent. Well, you can't do that in one day. And I had written a 652-page trial book on Oswald, People versus Lee Harvey Oswald, and I wrote to them and I said, look, I've put in the time on this. I know the story. I'd be glad to help. Do what you want me to do. And I got a letter back saying, if you'd like to submit a question. A question? I don't think so. Well, that was that. What grew out of 93, amazingly enough, was that the next year they asked me to do the keynote because they said you can, make it entertaining. And the keynote is a cheerleading event. It's not, here's what I've discovered. That's later. And I've done, I guess, a dozen keynotes, different places in the world. But as for conferences, I don't know. The year after WECT was in October of 13. The following year, on November 22nd, I spoke in Las Vegas. And they had called me in about April or so and asked me if I could speak on November 22nd, which is Saturday night. And I was speaking at the Mob Museum. It was formerly the Federal Building in the old downtown. It still had the post office boxes when you walked in, and it was the courthouse where Estes Kefauver took testimony about La Cosa Nostra back in 1951. And I got to speak in the courthouse. And I said, my first thing I said is, who else is going to speak? Because I've been asked to be on a couple of panels here or there with people that I wouldn't associate with. You probably know who the names are, and your listeners probably know too, because they're getting sued for books about kids in Connecticut. But I said, who else? And they said, no, it's you. I said, oh, I'll do it. And they paid the whole 9 yards: hotel, airfare, car service, everything. I wish they'd thrown in my gambling debts, but they did what they could. And I got out there and I saw this mob museum, and it's got incredible displays. It's just, it's $19 to get in, but if you pay to go in, you get to hear the speaker for free. That was me. And I said, how many do you usually get for these things? And they said, sometimes 25. And I thought, geez, I flew out here on Wednesday. I'm not going to get back home till Tuesday. 25 people? Well, they got 150, which was, very, very satisfying to me personally. And I had a lot of fun. The audience had a lot of fun. And if somebody asked me one-off, just you, Walt, would you do it? Sure. But, what I have seen of recent conferences is they're very thinly attended. And people can't keep taking their vacation to Dallas every year. And the core group who have an interest in the events gets smaller each year. It's demographics. People can't travel easily because, my back, my hip, my dog. It's each year it becomes more and more difficult. And what it seems, and I'm just throwing this out as a hypothetical, but what it seems to be is that you have a group of people, you have an audience. Half of that audience gets to present, and the other half slaps them on the back and say, nice job. But there's almost no collegiality. There's some bullying, there's some screaming and yelling, but it just isn't what it used to be back in the early 90s. Because I went all kinds of places between 92 and 96, I probably went to 15 conferences. Here, Europe, and Europe, they really put on a show because it would be once every 5 years. So they were thrilled to get people from America. It was just an incredible deal. The best conference ever was the WECT event in 2003. I mean, that was just on the far side of incredible. And then, sadly, I don't know how much you know about the event, but Cyril Wecht was charged with criminality for nitpicking little things. You know, like he made $3.50 worth of Xerox copies on the county machine, where he was the coroner, and he was indicted for that. And he brought in a guest speaker, somebody who was an expert on forensic pathology, to speak at a conference sponsored by the coroner's office, you know, and he sent a car to get some big guy. Because he had run for the Senate as a Democrat, the Republican administration back in 2004, 2005, whenever it was, indicted him. And he had to spend millions in legal bills. He had the Attorney General of the United States as his lawyer, as one of his lawyers. And eventually they just threw it all under the table and said, you know, forget it. He didn't do it. But it hurt him physically, mentally, and fiscally. But as I said, it was the WECT conference in 2003 at Duquesne was just. They had 8 cameras. It's like a stadium concert. When you're 60 rows back and you're watching the big screen and the guys with the guitars or the little guys on the stage, that's what this was like. And there was a monitor every 20 feet. So if you were 100 feet from the stage, you're watching a monitor 8 feet away, and you're seeing it in real time. And the production truck they had was like at a football game. With guys, you know, outside in the truck, go to camera 2, switch to camera 3. It's unbelievable. And you said, wow, this is professional. And when you see that, there's less of a tendency, forgive me, to get stupid. You got to be focused. And what happened, it's one of these, you know, Kennedy anecdotes that only comes around once every few years. Nigel Turner was here at my house for a few days to film my segment in The Men Who Killed Kennedy. And it had snowed, and he wanted to wait till the snow melted a little bit. So finally I got him the directions. Here's how you got to go. And off he went. I walked into the house, and the phone rang. And it was Ben Wecht, Cyril Wecht's son, asking me if I wanted to speak at the conference the following year. And this was Nigel Turner left on December 2nd. Ben Wecht called me. Would you like to speak at the conference? Sure, I'd love to. I'm honored. Okay, well, we'll get you a hotel room, and you'll be comped for the meals, and it was, you know, it was all set. What they didn't tell me was that I had to submit an abstract for what I wanted to talk about. So when I drove out to Pittsburgh, well, I drove from New Jersey to Albany, New York, 150 miles, to drop my dog off with a friend, drove back to Hillsdale, packed the car, and then drove to Pittsburgh. So it was a 700-mile day. And when I went Thursday to say howdy do in the morning to Ben, he says, oh, I'm so glad you could make it. Listen, you didn't submit an abstract. Well, you didn't ask me for one. Well, but I said, what do you want me to do? They said, we're going to have like a JFK 101 to start the program. Now, you only have about 7 or 8 minutes to present, but if you do that, and you'll be able to field questions, whatever. Is that okay? I said, fine, whatever you want to do. So as I'm standing there, Anthony Summers walks over to him, says, hi, I'm Anthony Summers. He said, oh, this is great. You're going to be with Walt on JFK 101. Summers says, what does that mean? He said, well, you'll have about 7 or 8 minutes to present. And Anthony Summers went nuts. I flew here from the United Kingdom to speak for 7 minutes. I mean, he was raving. It was like watching Trump go off the teleprompter. And I thought when it was his turn to get up there and to be on the panel, I thought he was just going to go off script, but he didn't. He was very professional. And the upshot, and it was funny because anytime I'm with David Mantic, Gary Aguilar, Cyril Wecht, Josiah Thompson, John Newman, anytime I'm with those people and more, Talbot, Morley, Don Thomas, the people that I really have that massive respect for, Mark Lane. Anytime I'm around them, I feel like I'm the new kid on the block, or I should be driving the school bus, kind of thing. And Cyril Wecht gave the keynote at about 5 o'clock on Saturday. There was going to be a break for dinner, and then the JFK 10 Thursday. Excuse me. There was going to be a JFK 101 that night, and it was Lazar, Polikoff, Anthony Summers, Zach Sklar, who wrote the movie JFK with Stone, and me, and maybe one or two others. I don't remember. But he said that Ben thanked his father for the keynote, and he said, "All right, everybody, we're going to take a dinner break, but I want you to know when you get back, as soon as you can get back, we're going to have just a dynamite JFK 101 presentation with some of the best people you'll ever hear from. We got Walt Brown, and they're there." He's trying to remember who the others were. And he had to reach in his pocket and take out the program. And I thought to myself, these guys are not going to be friendly to me at all. But again, I spoke for 7 minutes on Thursday night, and I went home on Sunday. But I had a wonderful time, and it was just wonderful. Arlen Specter spoke.
What? How in the world?
Yeah. And that was the kind of thing where, again, collegiality to a point. The gathering was on the 6th floor of the Duquesne Law School. And instead of Arlen Specter walking up the stairs and having people insult him, it was arranged that he was going to come up on a special elevator. He stepped out of the elevator. Cyril Wecht greeted him like they were long-lost buddies. And it was Specter that Cyril Wecht had run against for the Senate. And, they greeted each other like they'd been best friends. And this is a matter of hours after Cyril took the guy down in his keynote. And Specter got up there and started speaking, and it was like, I won't say any names, but it was like the president explaining exactly what happened in a raid that nobody saw. Yeah, I remember he said, "You don't understand. The bullet holes may not match, but the bullet holes in the body won't match the bullet holes on the coat perfectly, because President Kennedy was standing up the whole time waving to people."
Wait. Yeah, standing up?
Standing up. It's on the tape. And everybody just went, There was like the lemmings going to the microphone to question that statement. And then he said, and the limo driver, Jim Greer, I thought to myself, Jim Greer is the James Earl Jones character in the Tom Clancy books. It was Bill Greer. And you're the guy that wrote the report, right? And he could tell, he could just feel the tension in that room. When the Richter scale got to about 9, he said, "Well, thank you all for coming. I got a plane to catch." He was out of there, back in the elevator and gone. And if anybody had tried to run down the stairs, they wouldn't have caught him. It was just goodbye. But it wasn't like, I have seen conference videos where a speaker said something and somebody in the audience stood up and had a fit right on the tape. In 1991, when Jerry Rose was still alive, he used to conduct a yearly deal up at Fredonia, which is 20 miles or 30 miles past Buffalo, almost to the Ohio border in upstate New York. And George Michael Ebica was up there talking, and all of a sudden Harry Livingstone gets up and starts arguing with him. And Ebica says, "Look, I know what I'm talking about. Sit down." And Harry Livingstone picked up the chair that he was sitting in to throw at George Michael Ebica. I saw it, so I know what happened. 5 years later, at that same conference, I'd been invited to speak, and I looked out in the audience, and most of the people in the audience were speakers. It was a beautiful venue, absolutely beautiful. And Harry Livingstone is sitting about 6 rows back, and every time he started to get up, the two people on either side of him sat him back down. One of those two was George Michael Evicker. So, you know, the worms do turn.
Now, I just want to jump in here to say that I think someone recently told me that Jerry Rose is still alive.
Oh, okay. I thought he had passed. Well, I apologize to your audience for that, but he was extremely dedicated, and then he just dropped from sight. And the other one that did that was Gary Shaw, and all of a sudden he's back. He'll be speaking in Texas this November. Yeah, he was the one that got me that first keynote in Dallas, and he's good people.
I want to ask you about those that have been deemed turncoats. Now, you mentioned Norman Mailer earlier, the author of Oswald's Tale, but there's also Edward J. Epstein, who I believe did 3 books, and then, of course, the infamous Gary Mack, the former director of the 6th Floor Museum. Now, you have that group who were, at least early on, somewhat skeptical of the Warren Report, and at least somewhat admired within the research community. But what happened?
The best answer I could give you would be money. There's if you were to make a pie graph of the reasons, one of the chunks about, like an 8, like a slice of pizza, I would suspect would be family pressure. Because there is a group, and it's a sizable group, and I'm one of them, known as Kennedy widows, people who got a divorce, got their family walked away from them because, hey, look, we don't want to be involved in this Kennedy stuff. Well, hey, the truth matters to me. So I would say family concerns is one thing. There's a tiny slice of patriotism. Do I really want to make the government of America look bad? Well, if you've studied history, you know that they do it to themselves every chance they get. When the president comes out and releases a transcript of an impeachable offense and then says it's perfect, we don't know our history. But I think money has a lot to do with it. Because Gary Mack was a Dallas DJ known as Larry Dunkel. That's who he was. And he was a very, very knowledgeable researcher. He took me on a tour of the entire Sexton building, which was the TSPD. I saw the Hertz sign down in the basement, and he was working 18 hours a day, but he was making a ton of money on that museum. He was getting paid. Whatever he was getting paid as a DJ, he was getting paid 10 times as much to be an official spokesman for, the big lie. And he had said to me that day when we were talking in '96, listen, could you send 2 copies of Warren Omission and 2 copies? No, it was the referenced index book that I did, which doesn't bespeak conspiracy. It's just names and page numbers. That's it. And the quiz book. That's not a conspiracy book. It's for fun. Could you send 2 copies of that? And if the museum so decides, they'll offer them for sale in the gift shop. Sure. I sent them along. 2 years later, I get a letter. 2 years later, I get a letter from somebody there saying, thank you for your donations. But people can, Mailer, I don't think Mailer wanted to be seen as anti-establishment as he was being viewed. And his commentaries, and I don't know how many of them you would have seen at the time back in the early 90s, but his commentaries, in a sense, moving from where he was to where he became, are like watching a politician deny something he said on tape. It was, how did Oswald get from the 6th floor to the 1st floor in nothing flat? Well, maybe he went out a window and he was transcendent. That's not an answer. And I remember that when I did the keynote, I said, I have to apologize to all of you up front because this isn't going to be Norman Mailer talking, and that got a standing ovation. But Epstein, I can't account for. I don't know. Again, Epstein got what he got from Wesley Liebler. Liebler was a major source for David Lifton, just in terms of bouncing ideas, both out at UCLA. And one time, Liebler's at UCLA giving a talk, and when he took questions, somebody read the testimony of Zapruder to Liebler. And he says, Mr. Liebler, I'd really like you to explain this to me. And Liebler thanks Zapruder for his testimony, and Zapruder, who felt like he hadn't gotten his whole story, and he says, excuse me, but there were indications there were two, and then there's a dash. And Liebler says, your films are very helpful, Mr. Zapruder. So the person in the audience read that, and Liebler said, what the hell are you talking about? And the guy brought the volume, I think it was 5, of the Warren Commission bonds, took it up to him and says, here, read it. And Liebler was just dumbstruck. Not long after that, his plane went into a lake up in New England. Is there a cause and effect there? I have no idea, and I'm not going to pretend that I know that there is. But as close as Epstein worked with Liebler, do the math. So it's you can't say for certain. What would it take me to come out on your next program and say, look, I know Oswald did it all by himself and all this stuff? What would that take? As much as I could get out of Fort Knox with 14 Mayflower moving vans. Yeah, and not a penny less. It would just... and people have said at smaller gatherings, Walt's going to be a guest tonight, and he says, when you hear him talk, ask yourself this: how much money could he make with his reputation if he said, for all that I've done, I realize we don't know what happened, so we might as well just say, the hell with it was Oswald, and move on. And that got everybody's attention. And afterwards, they come over and they say, how much would it take? I said, you can't afford it. That was the answer. And I'll never forget, one woman shook my hand and gave me her hotel key. And I said, that won't do it either.
My gosh. I can only imagine, because I haven't had that happen at a conference yet. So,
right.
I want to, oh my gosh. Okay. I want to ask you about Stone's JFK. Now, Oliver will be in Dallas this year, so it'll probably be a topic of conversation. I think it will be, at least. It was 1991.
December 20th, 91.
Yes, correct. And rather than talking about the film or the details of the film, I want to ask you about it as an organizing entity, because it seems like, to me, at least from our discussions, it seems like the high point of the conferences were in the few years that really followed the film's release.
Absolutely. Oh,
Do you think it was an organizing factor within the community? And if so, how so?
Well, for one thing, go back to Dick Gregory and Bob Groden taking the Zapruder film to Geraldo. When that was shown on television for the first time, people picked up the phones, called the congressman, and the result of that 26 seconds of film was the House Select Committee. In 91, Oliver Stone showed that movie over and over again. The back and to the left, with close-ups. And it just, it got almost, in a sense, a new generation, because that was 16 years after Groden and Dick Gregory. And it was, people were ready for a look at government and a look at what happened. And, of course, the movie is a masterpiece. Whether or not I agree with everything it says is another matter. But take any movie that's ever been made, and have a little clicker like they use in the dugouts for pitch counts in ball games. Count how many scenes there are in that movie, and then divide it by 187 minutes. And you're going to look and you're going to find out there's like 4 or 5 scenes per minute. Look at any other movie, and there's 1 or 2, maybe 3, but nothing like the splicing that Oliver Stone was able to do with old footage, new footage, black and white, new stuff, photographs of newspapers. It's just a cinematic, whether you agree with it or not, it's a cinematic masterpiece that should absolutely stand for all times. At the last conference I was at, WEC 2013, I'd run an idea I had past Josiah Thompson, and he said, wow, I never thought of that. That's a whole new look at something. I said, well, I just wanted to just try it on you. That night or the next night, Cyril Wecht had everybody at his house for a buffet. So we're all eating in different rooms, and somebody in the room I was in said, could you explain what you told Tink Thompson yesterday? I said, sure. No problem doing that. I said, but it's going to take a couple of minutes. Everybody put the plate down. So I started talking, and one of the people I'm looking at is waving to somebody behind me. We'll be with you in a minute. So this guy walks over, and he says to me, who are you? And I said, I'm Walt Brown. I said, and you are?
Oh, man. I bet he doesn't have that happen often.
But when I said, and you are? He was like, you got to be kidding. You must know who I am. That was as close as we ever got. But those are the kind of things that happen at conferences, and that's what makes it fun. And that's why I think when you talk about, the turncoats, the bullies, or whatever, they take the fun out of it. And somebody can get up and argue something on Thursday night, and they won't let it go. Every time they see you for the next 3 days, they're going to, throw more ammunition at you, and they just don't let it go. And it's unfortunate. They don't understand basic collegiality, and I got a lesson in that when I did the book on John Adams. It was my doctoral dissertation, and 21 years after it was a doctoral dissertation, it was rewritten as a book. And the people in the early Federalist period community were unilaterally happy and impressed with the work. I mean, it wasn't David McCullough's John Adams. He borrowed heavily from me, but it was a contribution. And right or wrong, they accepted it as a contribution. Unquestioningly. It doesn't happen that way with JFK stuff. It just doesn't, sadly. And go look in the mirror. Well, I'm the first one to read something and say, this is rubbish. I can't read something that says 3 Albanian ex-convicts had nothing better to do on November 22nd than take target practice, and when this big fancy car came along, they said, hey, what the hell, let's try that one. No. I just can't subscribe to that kind of stuff. And by the way, anybody listening to this should be subscribing to the magazine that is put out by this program, because it's absolutely as good or better than anything that I have ever seen of a similar nature. It's Mount Everest, and everything else is moguls.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Walt. Really, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's true. It's worth.
And hey, I should thank you for being in the first 3 issues. It's been great to have you in, and you've done some really strong work.
I got plenty more stuff that's in the archives as it is, because I'm basically done. I've written 6 novels, 6 mysteries in the last 2.5 years, and I'm having a lot of fun doing that. I'm doing a lengthy book on the Yankees. And at the end of the day, there's nothing more I can do on Kennedy. The chronology was 32,000 pages long. Whatever you want, it's in there. And, well, there should have been an epilogue. I did the epilogue. It's called The Kennedy Execution. That's it. And I've sold a lot of them, and nobody's called up to say, hey, I didn't like it, it was wrong. Nothing.
Well, I'm going to ask you later about where people can still get your work. We'll definitely do that. And I know we ran an ad detailing that in the magazine.
Yes, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. But first I want to ask you one more thing about Stone's JFK.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned John H. Davis earlier.
John Davis.
Yes. He's the author of Mafia Kingfish and Mafia Dynasty and the Dynasty and Disaster book of the Kennedys. But then we also have Contract in America, the book by David Scheim. I
met David.
And then, of course, we have Double Cross by the Giancanas. Now,
yep.
This is the mafia angle that was really left out of Stone's JFK. And I think there's a tendency in the JFK research community to really sort of plant one's flag in a single camp and then fight to defend that camp, often at the expense of being open-minded to any involvement from any other entity, believing that sort of acquiescing to any involvement from other community or from other entities sort of takes away from yours, which I don't think it really does. And then you know that the CIA-only wing really seems to downplay any mafia involvement whatsoever.
Even though the CIA was reaching out to mobsters for Castro.
Yes, with Castro, correct. So then what is your view on how the mafia angle was handled in the film, but also how it's handled in the community at large?
Well, in terms of... it was a two-part question. In terms of, first of all, I don't have a lot of faith in the CIA, period, and I don't mean it's just as far as Kennedy goes. You know, Fidel Castro lived to a ripe old age, and when you read about the nonsense with the exploding seashells and the cream that was going to make his beard fall out, that's not what killed JFK. And I know, you know, there were people who had vested interest in the mob, and there's smoke, but where's the fire? That's the problem. You know, there's all these phone calls. Well, yeah, Jack Ruby made a lot of phone calls, but Jack Ruby was left for dead in Chicago. He was left for dead in a garbage can in Chicago in 1947. He got way out of town, went to Dallas, changed his name, and went in business. And I just and he was in debt over his ears the day he died. If you took his debt and put it in 2019 dollars, it was multi-millions. And show me a mobster who goes Chapter 11. They don't go out of business. They don't. They just don't. They don't go bankrupt. They may get help from others until they get over the hump, but whatever. And the other problem with the mob is they are not going to use Lee Oswald as anything, simply because he couldn't hit a barn with the gun he had, and he's a loose cannon. You know, somebody that runs off to Russia and, you know, drags around and can't keep a job, that's not a guy you want to count on, particularly with the stakes as high as they were. Because if the mob is going to go after the President of the United States, you know, cut off the head and the snake dies, they have to succeed. They absolutely have to succeed. And that means the best talent available, strategically located. And that just takes Oswald out of the equation. It's hard for me. It's always been hard to connect the dots between New Orleans and the mob. There's a little, but not a lot. And the other half of the question, why wasn't it in the movie? The movie was 3 hours and 7 minutes as it was. How they could have done more. I mean, as it was, there were places where you could see they had to squeeze the movie. I know. I finished the manuscript to People v. Oswald on a Friday night in January of '92. The next day, I went to see JFK. I didn't go to see it while I was working because I didn't want anything to sneak in subconsciously. The next day, I went to see it. I'm sitting there in the theater with a yellow pad and a pen to take notes. And when it ended, I said, what gives here? People told me this was 3 hours long. And I looked at my watch, and it was 3 hours and 7 minutes. Because it just moved. And if you or anybody in your audience has ever played that thing in surround sound at the beginning, when the car's getting closer and closer and you hear the rifle bolt being closed, when that gunshot happens, it goes all the way around the room. It just surrounds you, and it's chilling. But at some point, you have to come to grips with, make a list of all of the major politicians that the mob has killed. Who's number 2? I don't know. You know, and it's not something where you break in and test your ability on the President of the United States. And the mob has a way of letting you know. They want you to know we did this. It's a warning. This was our work, and unless you want to look like that, play ball. And there's none of that. I mean, maybe it's horribly understood by the people inside the Beltway, but I don't know. I'm not convinced. Besides, I think it was the military anyhow.
That reminds me of that old John Judge line. When anyone would ask him where the shots came from in Dealey Plaza, he would always answer, the Pentagon.
Yeah, I always thought they came from rifles, but that's just me.
So, let's actually talk about where people can get your books and what books are available and how much they are. Where can people contact you if they want to order something that you've done?
Well, my email is KIAS as in Sam, JFK at AOL. I still have about a box of Warren Omission, which will tell you everything you need to know about the commission. I still got a box of Judy Baker, which will tell you everything you need to know about her. Kennedy Execution is probably going to go into a second printing very soon. Of course, the quiz book I send along for fun. Just, you know, it was a million seller. I have a million of them in my cellar. And then there's the chronology on CD. And that runs 32,000 pages. I printed out one copy, more than 7 feet high of paper, and I had it bound up in 98 volumes. And the 98 volumes are available for sale, but send an email on that one. And then with the chronology, I include an index that I did years ago of all of the names and where you could find them. You know, David Ferry, well, look in Penn Jones's book, look in Whitewash with Harold Weisberg. And I spent 3 years on that thing. And it got its living guts pulled out by the reviewer, because that's something you sell to libraries. So I sent it to the library, to the company that does the reviewing for library sales, and they killed it. They said, you have names in there like Bridget Bardot, Beetle Bailey, Herodotus. Yeah, I do, because they were in the books that were indexed. As it happens, Kennedy had a letch for Bridget Bardot, and Kerry Thornley at one point looked at Oswald and said, he's trying to be Beetle Bailey. So there was a reason those names were in there. If you're indexing something, you don't decide this is important and this isn't. No. You see the name, you put it in the index. That's what I did. And it came out to almost 2,400 pages. And if you couldn't remember, oh gosh, what was the name of that Secret Service guy? You go to the back of the thing and go into Secret Service, and every Secret Service man who's named in the body of the index is listed. So you're going to, oh, yeah, there he is, Tim Greer. Oops. And there's 175 subgroupings like that. Oswald's relatives, Ruby's relatives, Dallas cops, ATF, they're all there. And it's user-friendly. And anybody that's been sending in for the chronology gets one of those free. Again, a million seller.
Right. Well, I just want to say this one more time for everyone out there. That is KIASJFK at AOL.com.
Yep. or I suppose, if necessary, P.O. Box 174 in Hillsdale, New Jersey, 07642. I visit there regularly.
But you'd rather have email first?
If whatever's convenient for them. If they know what they want, mail it or PayPal it. Just tell me, hey.
And what about prices?
Oh, the chronology is I think you had it listed for $39.95, which is fine. Judy Baker's $20, Kennedy Execution is $30, and the rest is their throw-ins, bonuses. I don't charge for them. Put it out there, have some fun. I think of the 3 days I spent writing that quiz book.
Well, hey, before we go today, I want to ask you one Yankees question. You said you were writing a very lengthy book on the New York Yankees. The height of my baseball fandom was probably the 1980s, and I was always a big fan of Don Mattingly, not in the Hall of Fame. And, he's a lifetime .307 hitter. I think he has 9 Golden Gloves. He was an MVP once, 2,100 hits. I think he's very underrated historically because the Yankees were in a rough period in the 1980s. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I would agree 100%. He's one of my should-have-beens in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he carried a famous franchise on his back for a long time. What I'm doing, I did the JFK chronology, then I did a chronology on World War II on the Eastern Front. That was a lot of fun. I recommend it for people in Florida. They'll really appreciate the climate. And now I'm doing a chronology on the Yankees, starting September 10th, 1947, which was the day a famous JFK author was born, and going right on up. And the first 18 years were easy because the Yankees were always winning. Whitey was pitching, Mantle was hitting home runs, the fill-ins, Billy Johnson, Bobby Brown, Jerry Coleman, Hector Lopez, you name it. They were all contributing, and they were winning. And then when they lost the 64 series, and I remember seeing the 7th game, and it was a famous time in history because Khrushchev was deposed, the Russians had their first 3-man space mission, and Herbert Hoover died all in a week. And the Yankees lost in 7 to Bob Gibson. After that, they fell so far, the escalator didn't even go down that far. They went to 5th place in 65 and dead last in 66. And I hope I get one order for every game the Yankees lost by 1 run in 66. 1-0, 2-1, 3-2.
Well, during my entire childhood, they were known as the dynasty, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cardinals. And I can remember in 1981, the Yankees playing the Dodgers in the World Series, and then the Yankees did nothing for about 15 years. And I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand what happened. How did this happen to Steinbrenner, and what happened to the franchise? So I guess I ask you, what did happen?
Well, a couple things happened. Number one, some free agents, once you put the kind of money out there that's being put out there, some of these guys don't feel like working anymore. I mean, look at the money Bryce Harper's getting. And what did he hit, 253 this year? Something like that? That's beyond absurd. For that kind of money, he should be hitting 353 even when he's not feeling well. They did put money out. I don't think they always spent it wisely. And I think the other thing, and I'll eventually get to this when I get to that point in the chronology, because I'm right up to September of 66. When you have that many high-priced faces, you got jealousy in the dugout. Because at one point they had Catfish, they had Holtzman, and they made a trade for Vida Blue that the league disallowed. But they would have literally taken the Oakland A's pitching staff after the A's won a couple of World Series. And egos are fragile things. And I played, after we stopped pitching, I played softball against Sparky Lyle. I played some ball against a few major leaguers. And the guys that were making $8 and $12, $100,000 a year were guys you wanted to hang around with and you wanted to play ball with. The guys that were making the big money, forget it. They wouldn't pick you over if you slid in with the winning run. I played left field 2 seasons, and the guy next to me in center field was Johnny Cooks in the mid-'60s. And what a super guy. What a super guy. Lived in the same town with me. I went to his funeral when he passed a couple of years ago. Super guy. Yogi Berra wouldn't give you the time of day until he was about 80 years old, and then he realized he needed friends. And the Yogi Berra Museum down the street here, and what have you. But it's a crazy story, and somebody needs some of these people in BaseballReference.com. Somebody needs to follow the free agents, how much they got and what they earned. Because now with these analytics, you can do it. You can absolutely do it. And is anybody worth $30 million a year? No. The bullpen catcher, he's not even on the roster. He's not on the roster, but he's the bullpen catcher for the Detroit Tigers. He gets paid $500,000. And not for nothing, but I could do that.
See, I do too, but I probably think I can do a lot of things that my body would say, no, you can't. Not at 47 years old. So that's just me. Well, actually, I had planned on doing this episode, and I had quite a few questions to ask you about Earl Warren. And that
we'll
didn't
do
happen.
This again.
So we'll definitely have to do this again.
We'll do it again.
Yes. Hey, Walt, thank you so much for being a friend of the show, and thank you so much for helping out with the magazine and just for doing everything that you do. Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, with your audience, and to interact. And not for nothing, I hope people get a chance to read some of my stuff and peel the onion down one more layer. I say to people, if you can read the chronology and not learn 25,000 things that you never heard before, you get your money back. I mean, there's history of the Secret Service, unimaginable stuff. My best to you, my best to your audience. Happy holidays, everybody. Remember JFK and be thankful on Thanksgiving.
And this has been Walt Brown. And again, his email for anybody that wants to order something is kiasjfk@aol.com. I'm S.T. Patrick. This is the Midnight Rider News Show, and we'll be right back.
This is Andrew Craig, author of Presidential Puppetry, and also the director of the Justice Integrity Project. For more on the real history of George H.W. Bush and the real power behind the presidential candidates in the past 30 years, listen to episode 105 of the Midnight Rider News Show.
Well, I'm off to Dallas to spend the week speaking to people much more knowledgeable than I am about this case. And to be honest with you, I love that. We don't all have to be on the Mount Rushmore of knowledge about every single topic that we discuss. Sometimes I think you just need to sit and listen. I think you need to just take it all in. I know that I do. And that's a lot of what I do in Dallas and at the spring conference of the JFK Historical Group. For me, every time I sit down with Ed Tatro, it's like going to college again. It's invaluable. What an amazing experience that is. And some of you out there, I know what I mean, as you've spoken to him at conferences too. It is just an out-of-this-world experience just to sit and listen to Ed for about an hour. The amount of stuff that you thought you knew is just minute. It's a drop in a bucket or an ocean compared to what Ed knows about this case. And really, to be honest with you, talking to Walt is like that as well. We need to have him on this show more often. He's just such a great guest. And I was actually thinking about our last episode too. Nicholas Schreck is like that on the Manson case. I just love to sort of ask him something and then just sit back and listen to what he has to say. Joseph Green has one of my absolute favorite stories in this field. He talks about the first time he met John Judge. I think he sat and listened to John for 3 hours. I think it was 3 hours. And Richard Bartholomew talks about the early conferences that he attended with a bit of awe, a bit of reverence, and you can tell that those conversations, those presentations, they had an impact on him. Yeah. My friend Randy Benson has spent an incredible amount of time with some of the best minds in JFK research when he was doing his film, The Searchers. He knows what it's like to be there. He knows what it's like to be in the room, or in the case of John Judge, also in the car, just listening to people talk. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to sort of latch on to someone with your ears. It's okay to be moved and inspired by someone's work. If I hadn't read Jim Marrs, I might not be here today. If I hadn't lost years of sleep listening to Art Bell, and God knows I did, I might not be here today. Had I not been encouraged by the right people at the 2016 JFK conference, I might not be here today on this show doing this show. I continuously, and thank you, but I continuously lean on Joe Green for advice about the magazine, probably so much that it might annoy him. I mean, I have no idea, but he just has a great sense of right mixed with a great sense of what's interesting mixed with the great sense of mood. He knows exactly what we're trying to do. It's just invaluable. So I usually ask him before I ask anybody else if I have a really tough question. So, it's okay to lean. And in this field, there's no reason to be alone, and there's no reason to do this alone. We're fighting multi-billion-dollar companies that spread false narratives. That is not an easy fight. So as I go into Dallas Week, it's just so important to remember that everyone started somewhere, but that everyone then builds friendships and builds research partners and builds groups and just builds a community from that. So do that. From the other side of the mountain, on the best side of midnight, I wish you peace.